Thank you, Helen. Last but by no means least is Lawrie Stevens, who's going to tell us about his experiences working with India.
So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to my co-panelists for the presentation so far. Some of that's very interesting. Thank you. So, from my point of view, I'm really coming from this from a slightly different direction. I've been doing business in India since 1993, and my current business is also the recipient of Indian funding. So what I'm going to try and do is just offer you a few insights into my experience in working with the investors, but also in doing business with India and in India as a whole. So to set the scene, I'm just going to give you a quick overview about the company. I'm not going to try and sell it to you, I promise, but then we'll get into some background sort of information. Next slide, please, Sean. And we're involved in intelligent content is really our business nowadays. We work with artificial intelligence, we digitize content, we make it searchable. We're very involved in complex areas. And most of our solutions are real solutions in the true sense of the word, rather than just bolting a few products together. We actually have to develop custom applications to achieve what the kind of companies we do. So there was some talk earlier about niche businesses, and I can tell you that we fall into, in fact, we tick two of the boxes that Paul was talking about. I think both niche and technology is very much where we are and where we sit. So if you want to move on to the next one, we can. So these are the main areas of our business. We're deeply involved in aerospace and defense. That's probably about 50% of our business, give or take. In that area, it's less custom development because these guys know exactly what they want to do, but the way they want to do it and the level of complication and some of the security things and so forth make a lot of what we do quite niche, and there's a lot of compliance and so forth involved in what we do there. Manufacturing is kind of in between the two, and then we do a lot of work with legislatures, you know, and that work there is involved in the chamber proceedings, for example, at the parliamentary level or the House level. And then beyond that, we're involved in legislative drafting, bills, statutes, the systems for creating those, which can be extremely complex and indeed ultimately lead to the sort of books that Helen, I'm sure, reads when she's trying to go to bed at night. Somewhere in one form or another. And anyway, and then in addition to that, we have what we call publishing, which is a more generic area, but in fact for us this is really about scientific and technical publishing, sometimes medical. It's a lot of journals and sort of, again, rather complex stuff and academic kind of research documents and things like that. So that's it, great. So our business is not typical in the UK. We export over 95% of our business, and in fact over 92% of that is outside the European Union as well, not just outside the UK. So Brexit has not really been a problem for us. And about 80% of our business is North America based. That's another presentation, another time, perhaps the reasons for that, but not for today. Although we're a fairly small niche company, we have offices in 7 countries, so we kind of look like a big company in many respects, and we have to operate like one in some respects as well. But in reality, we're quite a small niche organization. It's really about the skills we've got. So within those countries that we have, we obviously have offices in the UK. We have offices in, where do we have offices? I can't remember, in the US, in Australia, France, Canada, Germany, and we have 2 offices, 2 centers in Chennai, in India rather, one in Chennai and one in Bengaluru, as it's now known. And we have technical teams in both of those areas. Okay, next slide, please. So that's the background of us as a company, just to sort of give you an idea of what we are, where we are and what we're doing in the context of this. If we now move on, it's really a question of how we got there. So we were founded in 2007, but we actually had a history going back beyond that. We were in this niche business, or the early parts of this niche business, for many years before. And in 2004, our previous company was acquired by a major US corporation. They had great ideas of how they would take this niche business and kind of package it up and make it scalable and replicable and stop it being a niche business, and then 4 years later wonder why it was no longer a niche business that anybody wanted to buy from. But that was the story of it. And we saw this coming. And so in about 2007, I and a couple of colleagues who have been with the original business decided to cut out. We went back and we approached some of our original customers and some of those contractors who hadn't been able to get the sort of solutions they wanted. And we effectively set up as a phoenix, if you like, from the ashes to some extent. That worked and we were quite successful very quickly. But it became clear very fast that we needed funding and we needed to become what I would refer to as a proper corporation. I'm sure that my co-panelists would phrase it differently, but we had to become a proper business. So we looked at that and we had to think a little bit about where we were going to get that money and what would be the basis for it, because most of our customers were in North America, even at that time. The key team and the specialist technical resources we had were all in the UK or Australia. And we did have active connections to India. And by that, I mean contacts. And you talked about warm relations and things being important earlier on. And that was absolutely true in our particular case. So next slide, please. So, sorry, I've lost my way. Right. Our instinct was really towards India, probably because of the personal relationships. If we'd really gone even into the UK or US, we would have been making a cold start and we would have been looking for some agents or someone to help us and represent us. And we just weren't that sophisticated. And we were so busy just trying to deliver the day-to-day work that we had. We had no backup, no admin, no sales guys. You know, we'd take a contract on and we're working as contractors at that time, do the work, travel around, you know, over to America, wherever it was, deliver it, come home, but you're not building the business for the future. So it was all about sort of finding somewhere, some help. As it happened, we were also interested in setting up an offshore resource team as we grew in what we thought would be our growth. And therefore India was very much in our mind. I was very familiar with India and what was going on there at that time. And we decided to start contacting some of our Indian contacts. In the end, events rather overtook you know, our plans. And purely by chance, I had a call from an old customer that I'd worked with for some years on and off, who basically just said, and this was luck on my part, you know, well, I heard you were no longer the American guys, you know, we're planning on setting something up in the UK. Are you interested in working with us? And I kind of said, well, no, but actually you've saved me a phone call. So we kind of had the conversation and he bought in. So in fact, the very first people we speak to just bought in, and we were lucky to be able to make it work that way. And I'm just looking at Helen's reaction there. Actually, I'll just expand on them then if I can, because as I say, I had known him for a while, but he said how much, and I said, I don't know, probably about $500,000. He said, okay, done. And within about 4 weeks, we had money in the bank. I mean, it was just incredible. And it still worked, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the whole point about India and the reasons we were thinking about it and what this presentation is supposed to be about is that really we knew the people well. It's about warm again, and it's not only about whether you know people by name, it's about trust, it's about feelings, it's about fit. There's a whole bunch of things in those areas, and we knew that there was a huge reservoir, if you like, of not only good people, but people highly skilled and trustworthy that we could work with. Some, by the way, were less trustworthy. We had a sense of sometimes you need to be a bit careful who you're jumping into bed with, but broadly speaking, you know, it was a very trustworthy sort of reservoir of people. They were very hardworking and accommodating. Anything you did with India tends to be pretty scalable on the whole, and that was really our thinking, and one of the reasons, again, that we were looking to do it with India. The people that invested, which I'm about to talk about anyway, were an established organization. And by the way, investment in India represented, particularly at that time, and now also, but slightly differently, very good value, I would say. Not cheap. Don't ever think of India as cheap. That's the wrong phrase. It really is. It's about value for money and what you get, you know, for the bang. So, as I said, I'd like to think it was all professional and planned, but in fact, it was just pure luck that brought us to this stage and so quickly. But the Indian company was NewGen, the same company that we're still with. at that time, it was an old customer that we'd helped set up. We'd been involved in establishing him with some technology that he needed back in the early days when he set his company up back in '96, I think it was. They're now based in Chennai. They have 2,000 people, give or take. And they're primarily in digital services and offshore services and so forth in one way. So a typical Indian organization. So next slide. Oh, we're on it. Okay, now go back if you. So I talked a bit about it being a marriage and how it's gone. Is really the thing here, and it has been a marriage. It's been 13 years, the relationship with them as investors and majority owners, I should say, as well, in the business. We've had some very frank exchanges, and we've gone through periods of not speaking to each other and silence and, you know, all the usual kind of stuff. We've threatened to buy ourselves out from them a few times, and they've promised to help us as well. But in all, we're still with them. And in fact, I enjoy working with them, is the truth. I'm saying all this, I hope, affectionately. But it has been an up and down trip. And in the day-to-day challenges also, we've had, you know, what I've spoken about is really the relationship with management and investment and some cultural things that I'm more than happy to answer questions on, but not just going to push stuff onto the PowerPoint here about some of that. But in the day-to-day activities, there have been some challenges, and these would be areas that are, some of them are what I would call quirky, if I can use the phrase, and others are perhaps more testing in terms of day-to-day activities. I think a lot of them are centered around communication. It's a little bit like Churchill's phrase, you know, description of the English and Americans having a common language, but also separated by it. I would say it's the same here a little bit. I mean, most of the Indians who are highly qualified, highly skilled, highly educated, almost all have English, if not as a first language, as an absolutely fluent language. It's a completely normal language for them. All of their university study is done in English. Their training generally is done in English and so forth. It's a first language for many of them, and within their own business, there are so many languages within India. When they're meeting other companies, they will often work in English together as well. So, but they tend to be about communication. You know, the interpretation of ideas can be different. That can be both communication verbally, and it can be communication culturally in some ways. You know, we talk about automation, and for us, that's, if you like, if it's automating a computer process, it's perhaps switching the computer on, hitting a button and having a blank screen, and then something coming out the end of it 10 minutes later, for example, that no one's touched or intervened. That's automation. Sometimes in India, when you talk about automation, their view is that someone does task one and then automatically, and then somebody picks up the result of task one and carries it to the other side of the office and gives it to someone else for task two, which is also automated. And then that's picked up and moved over to task three by hand, you know, and handed over. I don't mean that to be rude. I'm trying to give you some idea of some of the differences in the way that we think about things. That's changing. Efficiency is improving enormously. And I think that's because the economy has changed. You know, what I'm talking about are really because when we first went there, and really even at the time that we took the money and got involved there, it was still cheaper to throw bodies at a problem often than money in solving a problem from a technology or from a system and a process point of view. And the result of that meant that we did miscommunicate often in what we were trying to achieve and why we were trying to achieve it. And I can't, that still exists within India, despite the fact costs have improved, have increased enormously, and there's a much more awareness about the benefits of efficiency. There is still a mentality sometimes that you need to overcome with that. In addition, we found managing teams out there interesting. There's a superb resource, as I said, a reservoir of talent. But whereas we're used to interacting with people, particularly in our area of technical development and things, we want people to give us ideas and feedback on ideas and debate things, and the whiteboard sort of approach to things. It took a long time to get our people to challenge us or to even disagree. They would just say yes to everything. And it was difficult to get value from what we knew they knew, you know, because they didn't want to challenge or perhaps question something that we had done. So, and you come across this in other cultures as well, and it was something that we had to work on from a management point of view. And it also meant that our management overhead within India itself was slightly higher than it might have been normally, because of overcoming those problems and working on those problems. So I think the other areas, and I don't want to dwell too much on the problems, but I think these are important things that you should be aware of if you're going to work there, is that perhaps they can be summarized with if I say that perhaps the two most dangerous words in the English language are no problem. If someone says no problem to you, you're probably in deep trouble. Okay, it's a knee-jerk reaction to anything that needs solving, and you know, we've kind of learned to say, well, okay, what does that mean, and what are we actually trying to do here? You know, how do we interpret this? Again, I hope I say it affectionately. It's intended that way, but it is indicative sometimes of some of the issues that we've had with running our teams out there. So it's and that really is often about message given and message received. We're seeing big changes in the culture, in the way that things happen there. We see the businesses are much more sophisticated than they were when we first started working, even in the 13 years. And if I go back to 25 years, it's unrecognizable from what it used to be. But we find ourselves now, I talked about, you know, management. We used to sharing with our people. I expect most of us here on this call are, you know, about, you know, for example, I remember an incident about 4 or 5 years ago where we'd made a very unfortunate investment in China, and it had cost us dearly, and it had cost us a lot of money. And indeed, without the parent company's help, without our Indian support investors' assistance, we may well have gone under at the time. In fact, probably would have done. But in fact, we were sharing just some of the experience with the company. I had a company call to sort of say, look, we're going to have to tighten our belt for a little while. We need to overcome this. This has been really bad, and we just need to be aware of our costs and what we're doing and so forth. And within about a week, 3 of our Indian people, we found out, were looking for jobs. And we sort of said, well, why? And they said, well, you're going out of business. You know, they completely misunderstood what the message that we were giving. We thought we were engaging, and in fact, what we were doing was almost frightening them with what we were saying. So we've had to learn. I mean, we've had to adjust our way of running our business. So I don't want to make it sound too negative, because it's absolutely not. I think, would I do it again? Yes. Would I take the money from India again? Yes, without hesitation. I've found the relationship with both our investors and what I would regard as colleagues really, really close. It probably took us a couple of years to feel an integral part of the group, if I can put it that way. You know, for a while we were still kind of the English guys, if you like. You know, we were still those guys over there, and we were a little bit arm's length, and we just reported back to the board. And then bit by bit we became far more integral. And we, in fact, we found it easier to take skills from both sides. There are things that we do now for the group and take on behalf of the group, because we're just more naturally good at it than they are. And there are things that they do for us because they're far more capable of doing certain things than we are and dealing with certain things. So it's worked out very well. I mentioned that really probably in summary, the things I would say most of all, first of all, that the support has been very real, not just investment. You know, there's never been a time when I felt they were just here for investing and taking the money. They've always stood behind us and been part of the organization. Now, a lot of people here might want to sell their business, so that may not be what you want. But if you're looking for investment and partners, I think it's just been brilliant. I think it's gone far better than it would have done if we'd taken, say, the North American route, in my personal view. I said earlier, be aware of thinking of India as being a cheap place to invest, because it isn't a matter of cheap. It's a good value place to invest, and it's not cheap anymore. I mean, it might be effective, but it's not cheap anymore. But the quality of what you get is extremely good. And, you know, we've had, we've actually had the chance recently where we could really have cut ourselves out from the group. There's been some opportunities that, you know, I won't talk about, but we could have done something about it. And when push came to shove and I gave it some serious thought, we chose not to. We chose to stay where we are. And I think that probably says everything that I can about the experience and how it's gone. So that's pretty much it. As I said, we've been allowed to follow our own path. But at the same time, I think we're now been very much embraced as an integral part of the overall group. And our experience has been challenging, testing on occasions, but overall very, very positive. And, you know, I'm very, very happy with it. So I don't know how helpful. I hope it's been helpful and given some insight. And, you know, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lawrie. Just checking my wife's not on the call, but that rings true with my marriage as well. It's especially if it's the no problem comment. If she says that, I know I'm in particular trouble. We are slightly over time, so I'm going to have to skip the questions. I don't think we have any at the moment, actually. But please, if anyone does have any follow-up questions coming out of today's webinar, please do get in touch. Our details were on the invites. I can more than happily put you in touch with everyone else. The one question that did come through, I just want to pick up on, was about the LPO in India. I think Helen is probably the best place to answer that question. And if you could reach out to her outside of this, that'd be great. Right. All that leaves me to say is a huge thank you to my panel, Paul, Helen and Lawrie. I hope you've found this interesting. I know I have in particular. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.